My previous movie was called Bus 174, my previous documentary. It was about this street kid that had hijacked a bus, and I shot the movie from the perspective of the kid. So it was really about the life of the hijacker of Bus 174. And so a friend of mine saw that movie, a friend of mine that works in an NGO, a very important one in Brazil called IBASE, and he said, I wish somebody would make a movie about hunger from the perspective of those who face hunger. It's a perspective that's not intellectual, it's not, so to speak, codes or cerebral, but it's a perspective that it's emotional. So you get really to know what hunger means for those who face it, which is something we don't know because we have access to the numbers only. And so he asked me, you know, it would be great if you could do a movie like this. And I said, okay, let's do it. And that's how Garapa was born. Well, I picked up 3 families in different conditions. So Lucy's family lives in a big town, Fortaleza, that has 5 million inhabitants in it. And Albertina's family, it's a very small town next to a big road that crosses Brazil. And Jose's family is in the middle of nowhere, basically. And so with this I could show the differences and also the similarities between what happens with families in different environments but facing the same problem. I met them randomly. I went to NGOs or to places those people go to beg for food, and I basically saw them and said, can I shoot? I didn't make a trip before my film crew went there. I just went with the whole crew and started shooting the families that would allow me to do so.
How big was your crew?
So the crew was myself, I had a DP, an assistant camera person, and a soundman. So it's 4.
Right.
Right, I shot for 45 days because in 45 days I could cover 30 days of each family going in between them, back and forth. And the idea was, you know, the economical cycle of families is monthly, everywhere. And in Brazil too, and for those families too, because some of them get aid from the government in a monthly basis. So that was what, you know, defined the amount of time that I would stay there. Now the shooting was pretty, you know, I would wake up, I didn't have any light with me, so I would wake up, the crew would wake up, say 4 a.m. or we would drive to the location. We always stayed at least 1 hour from the location. So we would have we would eat, have breakfast, but we wouldn't take any food with us. So we would go and we would shoot during the whole day. And then when the lights are down, say 6 p.m., we would pack and go back, then have dinner and sleep and wake up the next day and do this over and over again until we got the movie made.
As I was watching it, I was thinking one of the hardest things for a filmmaker filming this kind of film is, you know, knowing that you can go home and eat, you can eat in the morning, and yet to capture the reality of their lives, you know, however tempted you are to share your food, you can't really do that, right? Or else you interfere with the subject.
Well, psychologically it was very hard to make this movie for me and for all the crew. But then you think about them. If it's hard for me to make a movie, how hard it is for them to live like this. And then it pales by comparison. And also I knew I could help them after the movie.
And how are you helping them?
Well, we basically, I don't like to talk too much about this because it becomes about my relation to the families. But we are helping them.
Right. That's good.
I'll leave it at that.
Right. Your production company is...
my production company helps them, and the movie belongs to them. Financially it belongs to them. So it's going to open on the theaters, and any money they sell it to television, we have offers.
Right.
You know, it's their movie, not my movie.
Right. What were some of the most harrowing conditions that you were portraying? I mean, there were 11 children in one family.
The most difficult thing for me, it's not one condition in particular, but it's the fact that it's the same every day. That's what's hard for me. Psychologically it was hard because you go in and immediately you see the size of the problem those families have, and then you realize the problem is not going to go away. It's not like a problem that I have and that I can fix it's going to repeat itself on a day-to-day basis unless somebody comes from the outside and gives a push. And so one of the things that this movie taught me is that if we are going to solve the hunger problem, we have to do it deliberately. No automatic process, economic process, is going to do it. We have to decide to do it. We have to go there and help those families deliberately. Otherwise, it's going to be what I seem to be, which is day after day, you're going to go back and it's going to be the same. To me, it was, I'm going to go back to the location and I already know what I'm going to find there.
What exactly is Garapa? How is it made? And
Garapa, on the old days, was sugar cane and water. So the juice of the sugar cane. But there's no longer sugar cane available because sugar cane becomes alcohol now for fuel. And so Garapa is the name they use to, it's sugar and water. So those families survive big part of the time based on sugar and water. That's all they have. And Garapa is how you call that in Brazil. Even though it's a Portuguese world, this is a universal. So if you go to Asia, if you go to any place there is severe hunger or chronic malnutrition, you're going to find families that survive on sugar. It's the cheapest way to buy calories.
Right.
Traditionally, the northeast of Brazil always had the problem of hunger in the interior because it's very dry.
Right. So they can't grow crops.
It's difficult to grow crops because the rains are very
irregular,
and the government never really solved the problem. Actually, what you have, and this is another issue, it's not what my film is about, you have politicians exploring this. So, there's very little work. The work they have is agricultural work. There are economical causes of hunger present there. Everywhere you go that you find hunger, there's going to be some geographical or economical or sociological explanation for hunger itself. And there always is. It's important to understand that. So science is an important thing when it comes to hunger. But the goal of my movie is not understanding what causes hunger, but it's rather looking at hunger as a given fact for certain families and seeing how they behave and how that affects them negatively, so people will grasp how pressing this is. One thing you find, and I found it while I was there, is that the women are stronger than the men in those conditions. So those families that face those conditions usually rely on the mothers rather than the fathers. There's a lot of alcoholism with the men when they are very poor. Even though they have no money, they tend to use alcohol. Now, I wouldn't construct this as a criticism of the men, because remember, this is people who cannot have any medicine, and let alone Prozac. So if you are depressed, what do you do? And I do feel like the men feel they have failed psychologically, because at least in Latin America, the idea is that the man should be the provider. It's pervading society. So if, just think about what it is like to wake up every day and see that your kid has no food.
Right.
And you can't get it. It has to be devastating.
Uh-huh.
The Brazilian government gives $25 to each family that's enlisted in the Zero Hunger program.
Right.
So it's $25 a month. It doesn't matter how many kids you have, it's the same amount.
Uh-huh.
Many people in Brazil don't have documents. So if you don't have documents, you
don't have ID. Right.
You don't have an ID. If you don't have an ID, you cannot enlist yourself in the program. So you don't get the help from the government.
Right.
So we don't know how many people don't have documents. I inquired, and the government doesn't have the figure for that.
Right.
Garapa opens in Brazil on May 29. I'm hoping to get a distributor everywhere.
Right.
And here too, here is an important place to have the film. Well, the film is at the disposal of any NGO that fights hunger and thinks it can use it to fundraise. It's there. So just call and let me know, email, and you have it.
Okay.
And I extend that to the UN, of course.